Ephesians chapter 4, verses 14 and 15. This is in the great context of pastoral leadership, apostolic leadership, prophetic leadership in the body of Christ. And the Apostle Paul, under the direction, the breathing in of the Spirit, talks about these gifts. And then he says, because the body has these gifts, verses 14 and 15, as a result, we're no longer to be children, tossed here and there by waves and carried about by every wind of doctrine, by the trickery of man, by craftiness and deceitful scheming. We're not supposed to be like that, children. But speaking the truth in love, we're to grow up in all aspects into him who's the head, even Christ. So God's heart, God's desire for us is not to be living in this realm of childishness and immaturity, but he wants us to be grown up. So he gives to the body of Christ people in this room who have a responsibility to lead people to maturity. But guess what? You can't lead people to a place you haven't got to yourself. So we have to, in this room, be mature people. So it's interesting how things happen. So I realize I've got a retreat coming up, and the only thing the Lord really gave me for the retreat about 4 or 5 weeks ago is begin by just talking about the importance of our own spiritual health, our growth, ourselves, our character. And I think that's neat. And then I went out for lunch with a young man to encourage him in his life and ministry a couple of weeks ago. And over some really good pizza he ordered, he started to talk to me about the Christian alphabet. Something God's been showing him. And I thought, wow, this is really quite profound. And I would suggest one of the differences between a really young child and an adult is they know their alphabet. Mature people can, in their language, share their alphabet. So in our language, the first letter is A. And it stands for action, aggravation, maybe assault, and I throw those A words up there because that's a reality of ministry. And sometimes the action that takes place aggravates us. It feels like an assault. And when you get assaulted, when you get picked on, when you feel like, I didn't deserve that, it's really easy to quit. For the most part, I think Donna and I would say our ministry journey has been fairly pleasant. And I think Donna goes back to this more than I do. There was one night when the board asked to meet us, and we came to the church, and we found out it was the board and all their spouses and about 10 other people. And they set up a circle of chairs, and they assaulted us, not physically, but verbally for 6 hours. The meeting ended at 1 in the morning. For the life of me, I can't really remember most of the conversation that evening. The only really significant thing I can remember is they spent about an hour and a half yelling at Donna.
What?
What? Because she was in charge of our nurseries, and the nursery workers had decided that they wanted a TV in the nursery that was a feed from the service upstairs. The guy came to install it. She was the only one in the building, and she said, put it in that corner. Apparently, after an hour and a half of them yelling at her, I learned that that was a mistake. And you leave that meeting and you think, my goodness, hey, what was that about? God, couldn't you have protected me there? Don't I have a single friend in this church who would have said enough is enough? But it didn't, it didn't happen. And you look at that and you say, how in the world does something like that happen to somebody who is trying to do their best? And so somebody comes up to you and says, I don't like your preaching. How do you process that? More importantly, maybe more difficult to process, is somebody comes up to you and says, I like your preacher better than the guy who usually preaches. It's an action. Something comes and happens in your life. Somebody tells you it would take you more than 6 months to get a six-pack. Are you going to spend weeks and months talking about that, or are you going to grow up and get over it? The actions, the activities come into our life that can be aggravating, can feel like an assault on us.